So we finally got to the spotted cats thanks to Aubrey. However, it's just little Hosana and Xongile, that are tucked away trying to keep warm on this very chilly morning. And I'm uncertain as to where Karula is. Perhaps she is out looking for something to eat. And it's actually a good day to go off hunting because it's so cold, it's cloudy. The pitter-patter of the rain is muffling sounds, and of course the wind that we have occasionally got sort of gusting through, well, that will help muffle the sound too. Hello. He's turning into a handsome fella, don't you think? He's really looking lovely, but very miserable. Wet, cold. I don't think hungry because they've had something to eat. Now I'm wondering I'm not sure if Karula took whatever she may have killed the other day up into the tree, or if she had it on the ground. And I wonder if the reason that they left is because maybe a hyena came through and stole it, because that could have been a possibility. We know that that happened the last time. Oh, can you hear the birds now alarming? And little Hosana responding, just keeping a close eye on the drongo that was shouting at them. But they don't seem to be too fussed by that. Isn't that sweet? He's resting his head up on the log. Now, if you have perhaps just joined the show, we are on a live safari, and I'd love to hear from you this morning. So you're welcome to send any questions through to Twitter, and you can do the hashtag Safari Live. And if you don't have Twitter, don't worry, we have an alternative. You can send us an email, questions@WildEarthTV. Now, we're not going to get too close to these cubs. We're going to keep a slight distance. Now, James is commenting, saying how miserable these cubs look. You're indeed correct. It's quite sad. But luckily, they've got the big fluffy coats to keep them nice and warm, much like this big green one I have on me. Slightly waterproof. However, I still think that they're warmer than what I'm feeling at the moment. Now, hopefully Karula will come back. Aubrey picked up on some tracks of her, and they didn't seem too old. So she obviously just moved them, and they were playing in the road by the looks of the footprints, and dropped them off here. And now, well, little ones, you're not allowed to go venturing off. Let's hope they don't go too far. Maybe he's just going to reposition himself next to his sister. There's little Xongile. Oh no, he's using the luxury facilities at the moment. I always laugh because it doesn't matter what cat it is. It's a very specific posture that they go into. Xongile is not having any of it. She's curled herself up nicely. Maybe her brother will come up and curl next to her and they can keep each other warm. Now there's quite a few vehicles coming into the sighting, so you're probably going to hear a bit of motors starting and stopping. Now, Crystal, you were wondering why they don't snuggle. They may, but you know, I suppose Hosana is now getting to that age where he doesn't need his sister anymore. He's quite happy to sort of venture out on himself. They do play together, of course, and they will snuggle, but for the moment, well, he's not interested. And I'm sure, though, Xongile would appreciate it if her brother came over and gave her a bit of a cuddle. As it's been raining like this since yesterday afternoon, it just started, I think, at about 5 o'clock. The clouds started coming over again, and the drizzle started. And like I said earlier, we didn't have like a torrential downpour. It's just been a hard drizzle pretty much the entire night. And it seems to be letting off a little bit, slightly brighter. But they have forecasted that we get a couple of inches of rain over the next few days. And that's because Johannesburg had a mighty storm about 2 nights ago, and it flooded quite a bit of the area in Johannesburg. And we suspect that it's that weather that's coming towards us very slowly. But let's hope that we keep the gradual rain, though, and we don't get a torrential downpour. That won't be fun for anyone. especially not these cats that don't seem to enjoy the water as much as perhaps the lions or the cats of the delta in Botswana. They're obviously much more equipped to the wet terrain. Hosana seems to be a little bit unsettled. I think he's probably done waiting around now and looks like he's getting a bit impatient. He keeps looking over his shoulder, perhaps hoping to hear the row that Mom will give off to let them know that she has returned. But they seem very relaxed with us, which is really nice. They're only 9 months old, and in this sort of situation, it's important that we give them space because Mom is not around here. But they haven't shown any signs that they're uncomfortable with us. So we'll try not to move around too much and just sit nice and quietly. Now, Bobby Ches, you were wondering, and we've been chatting about it quite a bit, when these little cubs are going to start hunting for themselves. Well, Hosana's he's probably going to get pushed out when he gets to about a year and a half, maybe 18 months. The boys seem to move off earlier. And I think young Xongile will probably hang around with Mom for a little bit longer. It may depend on how tolerant Karula is also going to be towards Hosana. But just in my experience, the male cubs never seem to stay around for too long. They always disappear. So they should start joining in relatively soon, in the next couple of months or so. When they get to about a year or 2 months, a year and 3 months, they're going to probably start going out. They're going to grow very quickly now as well. You'll be surprised in the next 4 or 5 months how these little leopard cubs are going to double in size. And before you know it, Hosana will be the same size as his mother. Well, Xongiles will have a bit of growing to do still. And then it's sad. Then it gets really tough for Mr. Hosana. Now you can see that he's now given up on looking over his shoulder for Mom and gone back to trying to keep warm. Now, Turtle, good morning, Turtle. You were wondering how old will it be until these leopard cubs mate. Now, and like you said, you don't meet with each other. So we've just said that Hosana is probably going to move out relatively soon, probably in the next 9 months or somewhere around there. Before he reaches about 2 years old, he'll go off. And he's going to have to wait quite some time. I don't know if you maybe tuned in, it was about a week and a half ago, where we had Nkanyeni sort of acting very amorous around quarantine. And while quarantine doesn't really know what to do, as he's quite young, he's only about 4 years old, so he's still learning the ropes. So I reckon anywhere between, after about 4 years old, if he's very lucky, and he's potentially found an area where there's not maybe a big male leopard, which is unlikely, but there's always a possibility in nature, well, then he could start mating them. But it's a lot later in life. And, well, young Xongile, she comes into estrus anywhere from about 2.5 years or so. So she could mate straight away. Also unlikely, though. Probably another year or so. I reckon when she reaches about 3 years in age or so, somewhere around there, she'll probably start to act quite amorous and look for the attention of a big male leopard. Hello, Clinton. I believe you've just started watching. It's lovely to have you. Now, you were wondering how old these two cubs are. They are 9 months old. They're growing up very, very quickly. You can already start to see Hosana, though he's sleeping now, but when he does stand up, he's really growing into himself. He's a lot bigger than his sister, much stockier as well as being taller. And Xongile is still very slight. Now it's going to be really interesting to see where Hosana goes once he gets old enough and can go off on his own. I mean, I've seen a leopard cub at about a year and 2 months. A mother died, and well, it carried on, and he survived, and he's still going strong. I think he's probably might not be as big as what he should be, because he hasn't had all the nutrients. But he used to catch tortoises and scrub hares and birds and eat all those types of things. But they can go off at quite a young age. But poor Hosana is going to have to find a gap somewhere. And I can only imagine the first few years of his solitary life will be spent in and amongst other male and other female leopards' territories, just trying to stay hidden, not draw too much attention to himself. Otherwise, he'll get himself into a lot of trouble. Especially, you wouldn't want him bumping into the Anderson male. That would not be a good time for him. So he may even move right out of this area. He may go into the Kruger National Park towards Cheetah Plainside. Maybe he goes through the southern sector of the Sabi Sands, past Londolozi and Singita, all the way down to the Sabi River. And I remember I've seen Xongile down there, so we know that distance is not a challenge for leopards. They are able to cover huge amounts of ground in just a really short period of time. So it'll be interesting to see and follow. And this is the amazing thing, is that we are able to follow, and we'll see where he's going to end up one day. And that's thanks to the Panthera project that's done in this area, as well as through other parts of Africa, where we track the movements of these leopards. And of course, we don't have any GPS devices on them, in case you were wondering. It's really just by sight, and you learn the specific markings that a leopard has, from the spot pattern to the pearl necklace that they have on their chest, any scars or nicks out of the ears, or like Tingana, a smiley face on his shoulder that his sort of rosettes have formed, which is quite unique. And we're able to continue following them, even if they move away, and keep getting updates as to how they're doing. Now, Anna Marie, you want to know if there's any theory behind why female leopard cubs leave their mothers earlier than male leopard cubs. Now, I've had the complete opposite experience. I've seen it where male leopard cubs actually leave before the females. And the reason for this is that the females will often actually chase another leopardess out of their territory to open up a territory next door to her own for her daughter. So that's quite typical. So typically you often see interactions between mom and daughter for much longer than you will see with a mother and her male cub. So I think it's the opposite. I've seen male leopards, like I said, leaving from about a year and 2 months, and in the odd case where the mother had died. But an average age, and this of course is just my opinion, is normally anywhere between a year and a half and a year and 8 months. They usually move off, and you'll start getting a bit distance, and the mothers usually start to act a little bit more aggressively towards the males. And I've seen a leopard cub, or a female, and her mother interacting right up until this one particular leopard was about 3 years old. They ate off the same carcass. She went off and she started developing her own territory, but they were still interacting every now and then. So I think, Anna Marie, I think maybe just if you swap it around, I don't think the theory then would be the female tends to stay with the mother the longest, just purely because she'll actually physically force another leopard out of the area to open up a potential territory right next door to hers for her daughter. And well, the boys, fortunately, they don't get any of that, any of those privileges, and they've got to go off on their own. And I think life for a leopard male is quite tough. We see it being tough for the male lions, but at least the male lions, and well, lions in general, are social, so they form coalitions. But when you're on your own, new to the world, not sure as to what's going on, always had mom bring you food, I think life must be quite daunting. And I've seen quite a few young male leopards coming through, sort of lost and not sure where to go. Hello, Judy. Thank you. Now, obviously, every leopard, every animal is different. And Judy H has said that Karula's male sons always seem to be mama's boys, and that they always stay around till over the age of 2, and that's quite interesting, because the leopards that I've ever come across, it's always the boys that get shoved to the side, sadly, or like it is, not sadly, it's nature, and the little girls hang on for a little bit longer, but that's nice to see. So we'll see what happens with, of course, with with these two, and it'll be quite interesting. So perhaps he will stick around for longer, but it's not a very common thing. Like I said, out of all the leopards I've seen when they've had cubs, it's always been the boys that have been chased away. So this will be the first time for me, which was wonderful. You're supposed to have exceptions to all the rules out here. And Karula obviously hasn't read the same books as that I have, and that's okay. I can learn something from Karula. Now, I hope she does make a return. Johnny, does it seem to you like the rain is stopping slightly? It actually is looking not so bad. Still horrible clouds in the sky, though. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to sit here for too long, I'm afraid. It's a very, very difficult spot where these cubs are sitting. And I know that there are quite a few guides who'll be quite excited to come and have a look at them, but I think we'll be able to stay here for a couple more minutes. But fast asleep. But still listening to what's going on around them. And as they sit here by themselves, and they have these little cat naps, they have to be quite vigilant. Not necessarily with their eyes, but they need to listen out to what's going on around them. Because if a male leopard or another leopardess comes through, even a hyena, they need to act very quickly and, of course, try and get away. Not even a carnivore. It could be a troop of baboons that would come through. We've seen it with Tundi. And well, then they're going to have to run very, very quickly and look for some shelter. Not a unique marking that he's got on sort of the back of his neck, how there seems to be a lack of rosettes. Can you see that there? It's almost like a big creamy white patch. That's beautiful, actually. I don't think I've ever really seen that on a leopard before. That's a very distinctive marking, and quite a big rosette, how those spots have all sort of joined up. It's very interesting. So there we go, and that's what we look at on these cats, and of course the leopards with the most beautiful coats out in the bush. You look for these unique markings. Quarantine has got the airstrip going down the landing strip going down the back of his tail. Of course, we know that Tingana's got that lovely smiley face. Karula's got the big wow, the W on her forehead. And these two are also going to have their own special markings. I'm going to jump on the radio very quickly. Now, earlier I was talking about how we don't have the GPS collars on the various animals, and I know that James from Ireland was wondering why we don't use the GPS collars. And then you're wondering if it's because we don't want to have too much of contact with the animals, and that you have noticed a couple of collars on the animals before. Now, you're quite correct in saying that. Now, about 15 years ago, between 10 and 15 years ago, it was a big trend in the greater Kruger area to try and monitor various animals. So they put collars on elephants, they put collars on wild dogs, they collared lions, and an array of different species of animals. And they did this because it was experiments that they were trying to figure out. They wanted to track vast movements was a big one. So between the various animals, what their movements are they migrating? Is it seasonal? Or different things. And with the wild dogs, of course, it was quite important because we know that they're an endangered species. So any information you can get about a wild dog is super important. Lions, they were doing a lot of projects to see if any of them were being affected by tuberculosis or feline AIDS. So they were tracking individual prides. I remember this quite clearly. I read a document about the report and the study, and so that they needed to keep track of the various prides. And the thing is that you don't have to necessarily have the GPS collars on them, but if they disappear for a day or two and you can't pick up on them, then they can move kilometers and kilometers or miles and miles away, and to try and relocate on them and lose a week, that's, days that you're wasting away that you could use for valuable research and data collecting. But since then, they have taken the collars off to sort of try as an intrusive sort of approach to the GPS collaring. So they've removed quite a few off the elephants. We used to see a lot of the elephants coming in from Kruger with these collars on, but I believe that not many of them were working. So we used to have to report them, and then the vets would come in and dart them, remove the collars, and then of course wake them up and send them on their way. And there's a pack called a Toulon pack of wild dogs that's down. It lives sort of, where do you live? Between the Sand River and the Sabi River. And it loves those areas, or that pack, and it's quite a big pack. There must be at least 25 of them. And one of the males has actually got a collar on, and I believe that they've got no interest in taking that collar off. They've been tracking the Toulon pride pack for many, many, many years, and he doesn't seem to be too bothered by it at all. What they might do, though, and something that's quite interesting, is the collar sizes are now changing. So from 15 years ago, when they were large and bulky, they're now sort of downscaling them quite a bit and making them more slender, not as obvious. And of course that'll have a positive impact on the animal too, is that it won't bother them as much anymore. I'm not a fan of it though. I think this Panthera project, I think they're getting it right. Just sort of observing them. We as the guides out in the industry, obviously there are people specifically following the animals around as well, and we just report on the information. So as we're sitting here, I don't know, I think Kirsty will probably be putting in all the info for the Panthera on who we saw. Did they have a kill? Was it on the ground? Was it in the tree? Was the mother present? And all these various things. And we send this data through, and we get reports for the entire Sabi Sand, because there are a lot of different lodges that are involved. Now, and that's something that I actually quite enjoyed. And in the Eastern Cape, we used to have, I'll just quickly chat. I'm really intrigued by this GPS conversation, and I think we've got a couple of minutes here. In the Eastern Cape, we used to have GPS collars on the rhinos, and that was purely from a monitoring perspective, because it is so dense there. It's mountainous with rivers and valleys, and the vegetation is so thick that you can't even penetrate 5 meters through it in the summer months. We used to keep tabs on our rhinos just when we couldn't see them, and poaching unfortunately was quite high in that area. And a question that I used to get asked quite often, and I'm sure James and Steph and Brent and Jamie have had the same thing, is that we often had guests asking, why don't we just track the animals so that it would make it easier for us to spot them? And I think that takes the fun out of it. And also, a GPS collar on an animal does not guarantee that you're going to see them. We've had it before. We're tracking the rhinos, looking for the black rhino to see if they were okay. We knew exactly how far away they were from us, but we could not even see it because the vegetation was so thick. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we don't do it. And I don't think I would ever want to work on a property where they just track the animals. I think it really does take the fun out of it. How do you think, Gendre? Then becomes a bit of a zoo, hey? It's not great. So this is wonderful. Some days we see lots of animals, and well, some days we don't see anything, and that's just how the bush goes. Shame, little ones, you're cold and waiting for mum to come back. Now, Christian, you were wondering how long these cubs will be left alone for. It depends on when, and how, and where, if their mother makes a kill, and how far away it is. So she could be gone for a couple of days. It's not uncommon. They would have had a nice feast on whatever the Karula took down yesterday or the day before. And they've been eating, so they don't look particularly hungry. But it's very, very normal. I mean, I've seen a leopard once leave her cub in the same spot for a week. Well, that cub obviously was starving, but Mom eventually came back and fetched it and took it off to an impala kill where they feasted away. And we see it with lions too. I've also seen it where sometimes cubs go missing, they get lost, or Mom has intentionally left them in the spot. Maybe she's only on her own and she doesn't have a pride. Then she's got a hard job ahead of her to go and look for food. And that's, of course, what Mom's around for. Is Mom's there to also protect the cubs, but she's responsible for feeding them. So if she keeps coming back every couple of hours to check on them, well, then she's not going to have very much of a chance to successfully capture something. And sometimes these hunts take hours of planning. It doesn't always just happen in a matter of minutes. Now, I want to just have a chat on the radio. I just want to find out who's coming. Everyone has just left all of a sudden. Does anyone know how many vehicles are coming to the sighting with Xongile and Hosana? Okay, copy. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like 100 people are racing in this morning. So we shall sit here for a little bit longer until we get kicked out. Not that anyone's going to really physically kick us out. I'm just joking, of course. So what we'll do is we'll hang around for a little bit and hope that Karula is going to come back. But for the meantime, let's go over to Steph, who's in the tent, who are curled up into little balls, having a sleep, awaiting the arrival of their beautiful mother Karula. However, there's been no sign of her so far, and we suspect that she's disappeared maybe into the south, looking for a meal, because that's sort of where all their tracks were, but we're obviously a little bit uncertain. Now, we're just going to stay here for a couple more minutes, and then we're going to carry on and see what else we've got out in the wilderness this morning. I believe it sounds like James is having an absolute field day with all the small little critters, all the tortoises and things that he's picking up along the way. I'll be quite excited to find some of those too. And well, hopefully this afternoon, these little cubs will be reunited with their mother. And well, I'm almost hoping that she hasn't made a kill south of the boundary. I hope she comes back and then tries again here in the north, because we're a bit selfish. We'd like to see her every single day if we could. So that's what I'm hoping. It's been so nice to have all three of them around, and also just to get an update on their condition and how they're doing. And at least we can safely report and say that they look fantastic, healthy, growing well, developing their own personalities, turning into beautiful leopards. Xongile is not even showing her face or her nose. She's got it tucked underneath her tail, trying to keep herself nice and warm. Now, hello Ellen from Arkansas. You were wondering, would these leopards' cubs have a tough time trying to climb a tree and get away from a potential predator because the rain has now made the bark nice and slippery? Now, I don't think so, because what happens is when they do climb up the trees, they bring those claws out, which they keep hidden away, so we know how nice and sharp they are, and hook it right into the bark. So unless it's perhaps an old tree and the bark is flaking, that might be a little bit tough with a combination of course, the rain, obviously wetting the bark. But I think that they will be all right. Let's have a look. They've got quite a few little trees around here. And you know what they've actually got? They've got this big marula. Now, sorry, the pole is in the way. But they could quite easily go up this marula tree. You see there's little crevices. It's not too high, and there's a couple of horizontal branches. and they'd easily be able to run up here and climb up to this tree, to the very top. And if not this tree, well, there's so many bush willows and other fallen marulas in the area. They'll definitely be able to get away, even if they hide in a thorn shrub, something like that. That might be another tactic that they will do. So that's where you also have to say thanks again to the elephants that push over the big trees and create the big mess. Of course, like I always like to say, the ground birds like to go and hide underneath that. A leopard cub may use that strategy to get away too. But for these two, for now, I think they're safe. The lions, I think, are quite far away from these two. And they'll just have to listen carefully. There's Hosana shuffling again, trying to get comfy. Hello, boy. But it's not raining heavily. It's just a, I suppose you could call it a mizzle. It's a miserable drizzle. So it's... yes, I've had guests actually tell me that once, a mizzle. So I said it the other day in camp, and everyone looked at me as if I was going bonkers, but that is a word, I think. And I think it describes the rain perfectly. Shame, I feel so sorry for him. He's just looking into the distance, hoping that he's going to see Mom coming around the corner. And what's caught his attention is, I don't know if you can hear it, it's very far away, but there's a couple of birds shouting. But that could also just be a food party moving through, because it sounds like a couple of different species. Rollers, and so I heard a chugra and a drongo. So perhaps it's just a food party moving through. Sorry, my boy. Not the birds shouting at your mother. Come back to sleep, he goes. I think we're going to leave these two little bundles of joy sleep away in this miserable weather. And if we get any reports that Karula has come back, well, then I'll definitely try and sneak back into the sighting. But for now, I think we will let them rest and have a good sleep. Now this is going to be fun because we've got the roof. And it's a quite wooded area, lots of terminalias, lots of bush willows around. We need to try and find a way to get out. So let's see how this is going to go. But luckily not too many thorn trees, which is good. The thorn trees are the ones you really want to avoid with the roof because they can rip the top, and we don't want to do that. But now I also can't see. Let's turn here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think this is going to be a little bit trickier than what I thought, and you're probably going to laugh at me getting stuck. So let's go back across to James so I can save myself the embarrassment.